welcome to the Perrot Memorial Library Greenwich Penn Women book discussion of Caste by Isabel Wilkerson. Leading tonight's discussion are Lynn, Garelick, and Adrienne Reedy of the Greenwich Penn Women. Just a couple housekeeping notes. During the discussion, you have the option of using the raised hand feature to let us know you have a question or comment, and you'll find that at the bottom of your screen under reactions. Or you can simply raise your hand so that we can see it in the camera and we'll know you have a question. Alternatively, you can put your question into the chat window, and we will make sure that the leaders of the discussion get your question. Okay, over to you, Lynn.
Okay, thank you, and welcome everybody for joining Adrienne and myself tonight for this discussion on the book of Caste. Full disclosure here, when I first read the review of Caste, I said, boy, I gotta go get that book because she describes three castes in society, and in my life, which has been a long time now, each of those castes has touched my life in one way or another. So just for a synopsis, I'm going to just read the quick synopsis of the book, and then we'll go right into questions. Is that okay with you, Adrienne?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, it says it much better than I could go on and on about. In this brilliant book, Isabel Wilkerson gives us a masterful portrait of an unseen phenomena in America as she explores through an immersive, deeply researched narrative and stories about real people, how America today and throughout its history has been shaped by a hidden caste system, a rigid hierarchy of human rankings. Beyond race, class, or other factors, there is a powerful caste system that influences people's lives and behavior and the nation's fate. Linking the caste systems of America, India, and Nazi Germany, Wilkerson explores 8 pillars that underlie caste systems across civilizations, including divine will, bloodline, stigma, and more. Using riveting stories about people, including Martin Luther King Jr., baseball's Satchel Paige, a single father and his toddler son, Wilkerson herself, which is really powerful, and many others, she shows the ways that the insidious undertow of caste is experienced every day. She documents how the Nazis studied the racial systems in America to plan their outcast of the Jews. She discusses why the cruel logic of caste requires that there be a bottom rung for those in the middle to measure themselves against. She writes about the surprising health costs of caste in depression and life expectancy, and the effects of this hierarchy on our culture and politics. Finally, she points forward to ways America can move beyond the artificial and destructive separations of human divisions toward hope in our common humanity. So that is what the book is about, and it is a page turner, I found. And I have to say, I finished Caste and I immediately went and borrowed Isabel Wilkerson's first book, 2010, The Warmth of Other Suns, which is another incredibly wonderful story, or an incredible story about the migration of the African-American community from the Jim Crow South up to the northern cities, 3 in particular. At any rate, let's get started right away. Adrienne and I have a list of questions. I'll start off with the first one, and then Adrienne, you can take the second. How's that?
Cool. That's
we'll
great.
alternate back and forth. Okay. First question. Everybody ready? Wilkerson writes about the difference between casteism and racism. A caste is a system of hierarchy in which people enjoy varying degrees of superiority or forced subjugation based on what caste someone belongs to. How have you seen or experienced the American caste system?
I have an example. Years ago, I worked at another library, and librarians can be rather solitary people at times. And many of us would take our lunch and eat our lunches in the car, in our cars, you know, as long as the weather was conducive, and not a problem. And one of my very good friends, a Black woman, was eating her lunch in her car in the parking lot of our library, and the police pulled up next to her and questioned her. Now, I ate my lunch in my car not every day, but several times. No one ever questioned me. So that was very telling. She handled it very well. And thank God nothing further developed from it. They took her word that she worked at the library, and that was that. But just the fact that they would question her and not someone else was an example for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Judy, if I could just ask, because I think part of what I hope we accomplish this evening is that people will feel comfortable to share. So thank you for sharing. But I'd love to know, you know, how did that make you feel when you witnessed that happening to your coworker?
I felt terrible. I thought, in this day and age, this kind of thing is happening to my friend, my colleague, who, by the way, was voted librarian of the year in the state of Connecticut, either last year, I think the year before COVID. She's very well respected. But even if she hadn't been well respected, I mean, she was not bothering anybody. She was completely within her rights. And I was really bothered by it. It was eye-opening for me.
Yeah. Has something like that happened to anyone else? Where you've witnessed something, where you saw something happen and you just knew that something's not right here. Anyone else want to share? I hope that we don't have a quiet night.
Me too.
Remember, you can share via chat if you would rather.
Yeah.
If you're more comfortable. Oh, Lee Paine is raising her hand, and Joanne Deercock.
Joanne, okay.
And Joanne. Okay, so we'll take Lee and then we'll go to Joanne. Thank you, Lee.
So if you can unmute, Lee. There you go.
There, thank you. I'm sitting here
There you go.
struggling with,
You're muted
Oh,
again.
somehow you
Yes,
muted yourself again.
there we go.
all right. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hooray.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm sitting here struggling with the incident that I have in mind between a caste system concept and racism, but sort of like Judy's story, but a little different. I worked at the Riverside Church in New York during the 90s, from 93 to 2000, and became good friends with the chief financial officer there, who was African American. Very highly educated woman, quite wonderful. And we decided to take a trip to Spain together for our vacation. And I'd say the group we were with, no issues. But when we got to Spain and got into the first restaurant, we put our luggage in our rooms and came down to have lunch. And there were 4 of us seated at the table. And she was the only African American in the group. But the waitress came and spoke to each of the 3 others of us, and leaving my friend for last. And then instead of taking her order, she turned to me and she said, "What does she want?" And I said, and she spoke in English. And I said, "You'd have to ask her." And she said, "You tell me what she wants." And
Lee, may
I
I
don't-
ask a question?
Yes,
This was a Spanish person?
it was in Spain, yes. And she spoke both English and obviously Spanish very well. And this was a hotel that took groups like this, very, very nice hotel. And her attitude was so over the top. She literally would not write down when my friend said, I will have this. She would not write it down. And she turned to me again and said, what did she say? Never seen anything
Mm.
quite like that. Can we reframe that as a caste view or outright racism?
Mm. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm fascinated by the caste concept because I've been to India, stayed for almost a month with a family there who were Brahmins. And I wouldn't have asked the question, but it became clear as I stayed there how the caste system reveals itself. So for me, it has actual meaning to say the word because
Right.
I saw and observed with my own eyes. And I went to what they call a slum school there
Right.
to volunteer on 3 different occasions with my friend there. And so I understand much more about how we can be perceived as a caste system, but when it comes down to individual moments like that, where something happens like that, does it make a difference that it's a caste, it's a result of a caste system or racism, or did the two blend in something like that?
Who would like to comment on that? What are your thoughts based on what we read? Who would like to comment on that?
Marianne Shore has her hand raised.
Great.
I'll ask her to unmute.
Hi, my husband is joining in on our conversation, and he has an example that he would like to express. Do you want to
Sure. So just going back,
start the video?
yeah, just
Okay.
going back over 50 years ago or so, I grew up in an integrated neighborhood, and we were focused on sports, all sorts of activities. And we played together on the field, but didn't socialize off the field. And on the field, there was a great sense of brotherhood. Outside of that, neighborhoods were isolated. One time before a game, a black player was very seriously injured. And he was picked up on a stretcher and left on the bus for a long time in screaming pain. Now, looking back, I know if it had been me or one of the other white players, we would have been in an ambulance and we would have been taken care of. But the story gets better in a way or worse in a way. Time went by and I didn't see him again, and I didn't know the depth of his injury. So I went to the housing projects, and he was a very, very big guy. And I banged on doors and asked where he possibly lived within the projects. And finally, I was led to an apartment where I knocked on the door, and a woman, quite frightened, opened the door. I think she might have thought I was there for another purpose. And I asked where the boy was. His name was Lloyd. And she let me in, and he was behind a curtain, laying there, basically paralyzed.
Oh.
And I looked at him and I said, Lloyd, I can't believe what I'm seeing. You're here. And he said, he burst into tears and he said, that's unimportant. He said, I can't believe that a white person came to see me. No coach has ever called. Nobody else has ever reached out. And I've never gotten over that. It was a shock to me how humanity can get lost over color. And I just wanted to share that because that was an experience where I saw something that I still can't believe.
Thank you for sharing that. Very, 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 very sad. Thank you for sharing.
Anyone else? I believe Joanne Deercart, you raised your hand.
Joanne Deercrop and then Elizabeth Parker.
That's right.
Okay.
Hi, Joanne.
Hi. Hi there. Well, I was going to share an experience rather than answer Adrienne's question because
Okay.
I'm just thinking, well, I can't resist. I was a little confused about the caste race issue, and it would seem in India, they're all of the same race, if you will, but there's still a caste system. Our caste system seems to be basically color, which is kind of a weird designator, if you will, which is not necessarily race based. Is that true?
Well, Lynn, go ahead, Lynn.
Well, Adrienne, I'm not sure how to respond to
Okay,
that.
all right.
Because, yeah, go ahead. You go ahead. Hon.
All right. So basically, we talked about in her book, she talks about the when you look at the skin and it's the skin color. If you notice in India, you always see the lighter,
Yeah.
the shade of the skin, the color of the skin means something.
Right.
I think it's the same thing here, even in our country.
Well, that's true. It is.
The color of the skin, it means something. And so the lighter you are, I mean, even in African American, the lighter you are, the color of your skin and the darker you are, there's studies that have been, that people have already seen where children who are lighter are treated better.
It's
Children.
arbitrary. I mean, speaking as an artist, my God, what an arbitrary designator.
Yeah. So that's what you look at when we're talking about this caste system. But so Lee, does that answer your question? I mean, I am sure that your friend who was African American and the woman who would refuse to take her order, chances are it could have been both. I mean,
the reason I was thinking, as you just said, in skin color is through the Zen monastery that I go to, we're currently studying Me and White Supremacy, which is a really tough book, but a real eye opener. And the combination of that and caste is,
yeah.
But I was just going to quickly share my first experience, as you asked the original question, was back in the 60s when I worked for a publisher. I was going to go around the country and interview and photograph people who had used this new set of encyclopedias. And I had lined the interviews up by phone. And so I was going to interview a teacher in Shreveport. This was my first trip south,
right,
in the 60s, right? And I was from New York City. So the first thing was that the taxi driver, when I gave him the address, he turns around to me and says, that's an all-N school, which I didn't suspect, actually, having spoken to the woman, whatever, no accent, not even a Southern accent. So anyway, so I said, yes, I know. And we went there. And after the day of the interview and the photography, I invited her to dinner. And I was on an expense account, so I picked a pretty nice restaurant. And she said, well, I can't go there with you. I said, okay, so you pick the restaurant. So she said, this is one of my places. And so I went there. But that was for a New Yorker, that was a real shock that I couldn't eat somewhere, take this woman to dinner somewhere,
Right.
Thanks for sharing. That's one of the most powerful things in the book is when Isabel Wilkerson describes her own incidents that affected her directly. The scene in the restaurant where she goes to a restaurant with her white friend, and they are ignored and ignored and ignored and ignored. The white friend is the one that got crazy mad, and Isabel herself just said, well, what else is new?
And
So
what year was that? And okay,
do
was
you
that,
remember that incident? Did you read the book, Joanne?
I'm halfway through.
Okay, you haven't come to it yet then,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But there's a restaurant scene with Isabel Wilkerson and a white friend, and they are treated very shabbily because of the color of the skin of her friend.
Well, given from her picture, she looks a lot younger than me, which means that that incident was a lot more current than mine in the 60s.
That's right. So that is
Oh, yeah.
in the last couple of years, exactly.
Means
I'll tell you another interesting incident. The last 4 years, I've been going to India with my English friend, and we traveled all over India with guides. And one thing I found interesting is that one guide in particular made very sure that we knew she was a Brahmin. And she got to talking about her saris and this, that, and the next thing. Of course, we're riding around cities where the Dalits, you know, are in the streets, crippled. And oh my God, it's a horrible sight. But she made very clear that we knew what her caste was.
And why do you think that, Lynn?
I guess she was trying to establish her importance and to let us know, us white ladies know, that she was equal, if not better.
Right. It's very, very
It
interesting.
really got to me.
Very, very interesting.
Mhm.
So, all right. So I kind of asked number 2, if you want to take number 3, I kind of led into that one and just during this discussion. So
Okay, shall I go ahead and read number 3 then?
number 3, yeah.
Okay, sure.
We do.
Great.
Hi, Lynn. Karen Layton has her hand raised. I don't know if she wants
Oh,
to comment.
Karen Layton,
We
sure.
forgot Elizabeth. We forgot Elizabeth Parker.
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
Elizabeth.
Well,
Okay.
Karen
Sorry.
Karen is unmuted, so let maybe Karen and then Elizabeth.
Okay, Elizabeth.
okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
All right.
Hi, Karen.
Here. Hi there. I too am about halfway through the book, and we'll be discussing it in June. Our book club gave us 3 months to read it because it's so dense. Of the 6 books I've read on this topic, I think this is the best one. It's just so meaty and so well researched. But here's what I keep mulling over, your question: what's the difference between caste and race?
Mhm.
And my takeaway from the book is there's a lot of overlap, but the main difference is that with caste, you cannot work your way out of your level in society.
That's
With
right.
race, God willing, you can, with enough opportunities and persistence. So I think that's the difference
Yeah.
between them. But also a lot of overlap.
A lot.
But
A lot.
I've experienced, more race awareness, having worked alongside an African-American woman for 2 years. We were teen teachers. And so that was the biggest eye opener for me, was just to hear myself say things, and some of the discussions we had about where we came from and stuff. It was a wonderful experience. That opened my eyes more than anything, to really have a relationship with an African-American day in and day out. And, we learned there were differences between us.
Karen, if I could ask, when you say that it was a wonderful experience, could you tell me how has that experience made you live life differently?
Well, it has. It's made me listen to myself talk. And it's a tradition that I've celebrated my whole life with my family. Perfectly innocent, but it reminded her of Ku Klux Klan gowns and cone-shaped hats that the Swedish people during Christmas, they have some star boys dressed in that way.
Yeah.
And we adopted Sweden for the month, our classroom. And she said, I have to put my foot down. I just cannot have our class participate looking like this. And I said, oh my God, you were so right. I don't even know why. This goes back to the 1500s, but I certainly honor your, I'm more sensitive to it now. So we have the female with the crown of lights and her attendants with the crown of lights, but we've gotten rid of the star boys because it's a horrible symbol that I couldn't even explain why they've had it. Probably goes back, to religion, I would think, or whatever group started that.
Right.
The fraternity or who knows? But, so yes, it's changed the way I celebrate Christmas, at least around, other people. And it's just made me listen to myself talk and kind of stop myself sometimes and saying, where did you learn that expression? Or, just like a slave driver, someone's a slave driver, it used to be commonly used, and it's a horrible connotation.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Elizabeth Parker, we are on you now. I'm so sorry.
Okay. And Lee's first question about what's the difference between race and caste. It seems to me that race, particularly as it's practiced in this country, and as we have then spread it throughout the world, is a particularly American idea. The people who came over and brought the slaves over were not the princes and kings. They were workers, they were explorers. And in the need to feel superior or to be in charge, they probably started this system of racism. I think one of my favorite parts of the book was when she says there are no blacks in Africa.
Yes.
There are Kenyans, there are Botswanans, there are Hutus, but there are no blacks.
But when the Nigerian moved to our country, he suddenly became black.
That's right.
Because it's our device.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. Karen Royce, I see your hand raised. How are you? You're on mute.
Where is she?
There she is.
There you go.
Yeah, I would like to say that race is a social construct. It's just an idea that people buy into. There's no genetic difference between people. And so in that way, I think caste is maybe a more accurate description of the situation, because I think race is made up by people in power to demean other people and to control things and to economically gain by the work of other people. I also wanted to share two stories. One, a young African-American or Black woman moved to Greenwich recently and shared that her difficulty in finding an apartment when she was going to Yale. And she was only able to find an apartment in the neighborhood she wanted to be in when a white woman went with her. And then suddenly the landlords showed her apartments. In the end, she didn't have to put down a first or a last month's deposit. Before that, no apartments were ever available. The same young woman lives in a part of town where she can walk to stores, and she's very relieved that she won't have to drive that much while she's in Greenwich, so she won't be stopped while she's driving as a Black person, Black woman. This is 2021, folks. And then the last thing I wanted to share was many, many years ago, I was in southern Kenya near the Tanzanian border at a time when some tourists who happened to be, quote, white, I say quote because I think, again, it's a construct, but had been killed. And so when we got near the border with Tanzania, our driver asked us to get down on the floor. He didn't want to be seen driving white people because he didn't want his vehicle attacked. And that was the first time that I'd ever been in a situation like that, where I was the danger to other people and that I had to hide the color of my skin. And it definitely stayed with me as an experience.
Wow, Karen,
Mhm.
thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So, all right.
Okay, shall
Go
we
ahead.
move on, Adrienne?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, we'll try number 3.
Okay.
This is wonderful. This is what Adrienne and I are hoping, is that everybody will speak up and share. Race is a new concept. Irish, Italians, Poles, Czechs, and more became white for the first time in America. Either knowing this or learning this, how does this affect conversations about race you have witnessed or been part of?
Come on, ladies and gents. And let me just say something here, I know it's kind of hard to come in this type of forum and share, but I think that we can learn from one another when we can come together and people not feel judged or whatever. We're just asking for your experiences or your thoughts, because something that you say may change a person's mind, may change something that was going on in their own hearts that they didn't even realize was in there. I'm just a firm believer that these conversations are so important, because for so long people felt so uncomfortable talking about race. But, I read in a book once that something that says something like, you should know the truth, and it's the truth that sets us free. And I am hoping that as time goes on, people will feel comfortable enough to talk about race, not so that they would be judged. They would talk about race so that we can learn and grow together as people who want to see our country become a better place. So that's why Lynn and I wanted to do this book discussion with you, because we feel that the more people talk about it, the more they will understand their own biases, their own feelings of and not to be fearful of it. So I commend you for even showing up. I commend you for showing your faces, and I commend you for talking, but let's talk some more. Deal?
Yeah.
Thumbs up.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes,
I-
Joan Lowe.
Joan Lowe is,
Yes.
Okay, good.
I'm not answering, but would you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Race is a new concept. Irish, Italians, Poles, Czechs, and more became white for the first time in America. Either knowing this or learning this, how does this affect conversations about race you have witnessed or been part of?
Am I still unmuted?
yes.
No, we can hear you,
Yes, you
Karen.
are.
Okay, I'll just say briefly, I think we all, had nicknames for people from different races and jokes about different races. So that's probably, my first experience with it, is people calling other people from other countries names and then making fun of them. Like, how many light bulbs does it take for, 2 poles to screw a light bulb in, or something like that? Or why do they have flat heads and round shoulders? I don't know. So just, that's what first comes to my mind.
Okay, but I think also what we're trying to get at here is how, knowing this now, just like we just discussed, how people from Africa did not realize that they were Black until they came to our country.
Right.
Right.
You go to Kenya, and my friends will be the first to tell you, he was like, we don't talk, you guys, you Americans, you talk like this. He goes, I forget what is his I forget what he is, but a Bantu or whatever, and his wife, is from a different tribe, but it's tribal. Here, now white people, you have your Italian people, your Irish people, your Czech people, everyone now, you guys are white.
True. And I know exactly where you're coming from too. Like, I would have been a Swedish American, and a proud one, but to go through Ellis Island, the names were changed right off the boat because they spelled differently. So they just, went with the American version. So, and they just kind of assimilated you into the culture by changing your name. And that's one thing I can think of.
Yeah. Karen?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, Karen
Joan.
Boyce.
I think Joan is next.
By the
Joan?
by the same token,
Oh.
nobody was white until they came to America
Right.
either.
Mm.
That the landowners in Virginia created that concept because they were nervous because freed enslaved people, or previously enslaved people, indigenous people, and indentured people were living together, and the powers that be, the male landowners who had the right to vote, were getting nervous that there would be a rebellion or an uprising. So they gave the European people very small slight advantages. And that pitted them against the other people. And that's where the concept of white came from.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, another thing that I think Isabel Wilkerson makes very clear is that caste dehumanizes the Black person and therefore gives the white person power. And that's why it's so dangerous and became that way in our country, because it was to keep the Black man and woman in their place. They were dehumanized.
Joan,
Thank
you
you.
have something you wanted to
Adrienne,
say?
by the way, you said a couple of things that I really like. Thank you for saying those about race and feelings. Let me just put this in perspective, because I learned from this and I thought I didn't have to learn anything more, but I did. I worked at Greenwich High School. I was an English teacher and then a counselor, and I ended my long career there. The last 15 years, I was a social worker. And I helped create a program called A Better Chance.
Oh, yeah.
The purpose of A Better Chance was to help kids get support they needed from teachers and from tutoring to have a better chance to move forward and make achievements. And I'll never forget this, because it really was stunning to me personally, because I didn't get it until that moment. We were working at the time with 3 kids, a Black girl, a Latina girl, and a Latino boy. Smart kids, never recognized for their brightness, and always were they assumed that they would be in the mid-level classes. Then we got them in Better Chance, and they had a senior tutor who we chose, great kids who would work with them 3 days a week and help them with their homework, help them do things like conference with a teacher that most kids at Greenwich High School know how to do. These kids thought we were crazy people. The end of the story, and I could go on and on, but I learned so much about our culture and about race and what it does to the kids who are in a minority race. We worked with a Black kid who was very smart, English teacher and a history teacher, social studies, and me, to really get him to gain confidence. And based on his performance and his test scores, we got him into an honors class. And we just patted ourselves on the back and thought this is the greatest thing we're ever going to do for this kid. We had no clue how difficult that was going to be for that wonderful, smart, had a lot of confidence because of A Better Chance. He just said, I'm a smart kid. I think I can go to college. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. There's a better chance. He walked into an honors class and was overwhelmed. He was the only non-white kid in the class. He felt when he wanted to, in other classes, he could raise his hand and talk. He couldn't talk. He was paralyzed. There were so many things that went along with that placement for me that were kind of, I wasn't prepared for it. It was almost cruel. And here we are celebrating and look what we did and we're, and then he gets there and he's intimidated, overwhelmed. I'm not as smart as, it took months for us to get him comfortable in the class, and bless his heart, he didn't want to run away, but it was, he suffered. And I, as this social worker who just thought I just knew everything, said, wow, I really missed a big thing here. I missed the core of this kid and what we were doing to him. The two girls were accepted, and we got money to pay for it, to a SAT prep course. And I drove them there and dropped them off and said, oh boy, I'm good. They hated it because they were so uncomfortable. And again, the do-gooder and the do-gooder teachers didn't dig deep enough to really understand how hard that step is for so many kids who aren't white, who aren't received in the class, I think. And even though the teachers were prepped and everything, the peer group just said, you know, this is pretty odd at Greenwich High School. So it was enlightening for me, thinking I was a do-gooder, but the work that came after to get those kids to feel comfortable was enormous. And it was a learning lesson. That's all I want to share with you, but I really learned, and I was old. I was an educator for years.
Right.
It wasn't to that moment when I kind of pushed that little thing that I learned something momentous for me personally. Not that I was ever judgmental or mean or anything, but I didn't, it was a piece of that empathy that I missed.
Right.
And I think that's important for people to understand,
Yeah.
that it's hard for kids,
I-
even given opportunities to participate. That's all.
No, that's a very
That's
good
wonderful.
point.
Yeah.
That
You
is
know,
wonderful.
what it says, I think, Joan, is that, and what's so good about this book is it tests our assumptions. We make assumptions that are not right.
Yeah.
That are not knowledgeable and at times cruel, because we just assume we know. And
Yeah.
we don't.
And
We don't know
you-
everything.
You described me as an experienced social worker. I was an educator for years. I just assumed, and I didn't really dig.
Yeah.
It was a lesson in life I will never forget. Not that those kids are ever mad at me. I kind of nursed them through. I think I was mad at myself for not thinking ahead of time to prep them more.
Prep them.
Anyway, yeah, but the book does that.
Yeah.
And this life experience did it for me.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that programs like ABC are great programs, but I also think that getting people to participate in assisting and helping, it's a lot of work. And that's where people have to come and be open to learn, and also just simply understand that it really does take a village.
Mhm.
And when we are, I think that I just will applaud the day when we don't have to have programs like ABC, A Better Chance, because I believe that every child should, in this United States of America, in this country, should have equal access to a great educational system that provides them a great education. I just think that that's just, something that should be. So,
In our
I think-
public education system, absolutely. And it should start with Head Start.
Exactly.
Cool.
Exactly. And so when you get to understand that, you go into some of these other areas where some of the ABC kids are coming from, it's amazing that they're able to come and excel, leaving their families to come to areas like a Greenwich, or, we have an ABC program in Wilton. It's the same thing. These kids come, but the
That's
community.
right. Greenwich High School was within Greenwich High School. I stole the idea from other school districts. We didn't have a house to house them.
Right.
And I looked around the building and said, we have those kids here.
Right.
And one other thing, I don't want to talk much more, but the impact ABC had on the senior tutors.
Exactly.
Who were these AP, bright kids who volunteered their time. At the end of the year, we had a sharing. It just moved everyone to tears. But one of the themes were the tutors saying, if it weren't for this program, I love blah, blah, blah. And I love to sit at her table because there's segregated tables at Greenwich High School.
Yeah.
If it weren't for her, I would not know her. Weren't for this program, I would not know her. And it weren't for her, I would never have been able to sit with different groups of kids, her friends, and get to know them and love them the way I do.
And
I would have
hopefully,
walked out of this building and not been involved. It was a beautiful piece of that we didn't expect.
exactly.
We
And
just
hopefully
expected the little kids to get a tutor, and we didn't expect the impact on the older kids.
Right.
All right, I'm done.
And they're changing, and hopefully they turn to be people who change the world.
Yeah, they did.
Right.
They did.
Exactly.
Yeah, breaking down the barriers.
Breaking down the barriers.
Yeah.
Breaking down the barriers.
And we have to talk to start to break down the barriers.
That's it. That is it. Okay, so
shall we go on to the next one?
Well, before we go on, Diane Morello's been
Hey,
waiting.
Diane.
Diane, hi.
Oh, you're
muted,
He's
Diane.
asking her to unmute.
Unmute. Unmute, Diane.
I'll ask her again.
Unmute.
There you go.
There you go.
It's too complicated. Everybody should be unmuted. This is one of the most interesting and challenging and disturbing books I have read in a long time. I'm a fiction reader in general. This was beyond fiction for me and frightening in many ways. I want to go back to the question that, Lynn, you were mentioning earlier about the white people, and I'll give it from a different perspective on this point. My grandparents came to the United States in I think 1910, and they all came from Orthodox Jews, from Poland and Russia. What was Russia was now Belarus. And when they came to the United States, they were in fact separated by language, separated by education, separated by where they lived. So they moved in the Lower East Side. And you can see that their assimilation happened as they moved from city to city, from parts of New York City, ending up in the northern Bronx. My point behind this is that when I read the book, when I was reading the book, there were two things that it brought to mind. One is the idea she says about how even within Europeans, the caste system started to appear in terms of people from the Nordic countries and Western Europe were the highest caste members. The white people from Eastern Europe and Southern Europe were lower caste.
Right.
It was pretty straight when she was saying that, and it disturbed me on that one. But not nearly as much as what we just go forward 20 to 30 years to discover that the whole Nazi hierarchy is based on the abhorrent practices that we have in our own country, or that I would like to say that we had, but it's quite clear that it's still there. And these questions about The systemic racism, which is the lightning rod that we've seen for the past 3 months, is probably stronger to get people's thinking about it than if we said this is a caste system that we'll never get out of.
Right.
You know, the racism is something that is present, whether in the case of what I saw, the idea that the United States was looked at as the role model for
Right.
the most horrendous kind of behavior that we have seen in, that we would typically have looked at on this one. I was so upset by that. And, you know, it just made me cry. I was, it made me really sorry and appalled at our country, at you know, it was real, it's always easy to point to the Nazis and make them really bad. You know, if you have Nazi in a sentence, it's a bad sentence.
Right.
But the idea that the Nazis, that the people who were in the Nazi party were using the American behaviors and our systematic laws and the laws about separating people and blood levels and things. Oh, it was more disturbing than I think I've encountered anything in a long time. So I really, I mean, I can't get enough of Isabel Wilkerson when I read her or when I watch her or listen to her presentations. But this one had, you know, had a real response for me, resonated with me in a horrible way, actually, because of my family having separated themselves from Europe to go to the United States, in large part to take themselves away from what was becoming a vile community. Right. And then to discover that they move into the United States. They moved to the United States, and in maybe less obvious ways, it starts to show up. So it's not just about black and white on these things, but the black and the white seems to be the most representative. The dehumanization that we talk about here is also showing up in the Latin people who are coming to the United States from other countries, from people in Asia, especially now with the COVID. It's a great way to let people do appalling things to people and not really have any personal feelings about it.
I mean, but thanks for bringing that up. I mean, we were certainly going to get to that, but you brought it up, Lynn. If I could just jump down to number 10. But for me, that was shocking.
Shocking.
That, and she documents it so well. She
documents it so well. But I mean, did other people find that like appalling and shocking, or did you know that? Like, I didn't know that.
I didn't either. It was
when she laid it out, I couldn't imagine it. And when she laid it out, it was so clear.
It was so clear.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe it. Other people want to comment on that, because I thought for that was the surprise of the book for me.
I think Pam Sloane would like to say something.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you all for everything that has been said. That was the single most shocking thing in the book for me. If I had to pull out one thing, that was it. And I kept thinking, how come I don't know this? I'm a former teacher. I worked with kids my whole life, and I didn't know this about our country doing this, being the model, the horrible model for the Nazis. And we were so awful, they did not embrace all of what we have done. That was the most disturbing piece to me.
Yes.
If that was one thing in the book, that's what blew me away and shocked me and made me more horrified by what is currently going on and what has continued from our distant past. So thank you for bringing that up, Diane. It was very well stated.
Yeah. Yeah, that and to me, when you see that, and then it just, as an African American woman, it just answers so many questions. And but my hope was like, wow, like this book should be required reading in every school. Like the kids need to hear this. They need to know this. This is a part of our history that really you know, again, I always say this, not for judgment, but not to continue to make the same mistakes over and over and over and over and over again. You can't dispute, you just can't, when you see this, it's like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. We have so
Yeah,
work to do.
we do.
So much work to do. So we can scratch number 10 off, Lynn. Go ahead.
Okay, we'll scratch number 10. We did that.
Yeah.
Let's see. What shall we do, Adrienne?
I think number 7 is a good one.
Yeah, number 7 is good. Was the information about the purity versus pollution? Yeah, that's a good one. Purity versus pollution pillar new to you? How does it change your perception of American community pools and private swim clubs?
Anyone want to talk about that one?
Yeah. Did anybody, was that an insight about emptying the pool? And
Judy, did you see someone? I heard someone say something, but
I'm looking to see, let me see on the,
is that Nadia? Are you waving?
don't be shy if you're,
I answered,
Okay.
Karen. Yeah,
Go
I can't speak about the community pools, but I can say it's very obvious that the most polluted parts of the urban cities are usually inhabited by Blacks who couldn't qualify for mortgages, you know, what, 30, 40 years ago. So I see that more clearly than I do, you know, not being allowed in a swimming pool or separate bathrooms like, you know, we've come to see, but just the neighborhoods that people are forced to live in and the pollution and toxic chemicals and things like that are such a dividing line.
Yeah, definitely.
Mhm.
Definitely.
You know, it was insightful to me too, and it made me look back in my mind in my youth. I actually was born and raised in Hawaii, and we didn't move to San Francisco until I was 15. So I grew up in a highly diverse community where I was the minority in the classrooms. And in Hawaii, the whites are called haoles. That's Hawaiian for white. And this caste system is alive and well in Hawaii. Boy, you knew where your position was, believe me. And I had no idea about African Americans, Black people. They weren't in Hawaii. And we all went and swam in the pools together. And we went to the beach together and we played in the parks together. There was no crossing the street because you couldn't walk on the same street as a Black person. That was all new to me. I didn't learn about this until I was in the 9th grade and I moved to San Francisco. Can you believe that?
Mm-hmm.
So this whole pool and the pollution, of course, I knew about it once I'd read, you know, I learned about it when I got here, but she brought it up again in my mind of how ignorant I was growing up of the position of the African American community in this country and how dehumanizing it is and how every effort was made to keep them in their position, in their caste, down at the bottom.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So say that again, Karen.
And still is.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
When we were starting to lay the groundwork for building a public pool in Greenwich, and I went to my district that I lived in to talk to the RTM members, I got the, well, why can't they swim in the YW? Why can't they swim? You know, we don't want those people here. All the codes for racist language came out. I mean, I think that was the moment I got in my car and decided I was moving from that neighborhood. It was, I guess I shouldn't have been shocked, but I was still shocked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, the pool is open and everyone is enjoying it.
Good.
They got over it.
Well, probably those
Sorta.
people that spoke up at that meeting are
That's
not
right.
enjoying it.
Right.
Lee Paine has a comment. Lee, could you unmute?
My best. Yes, there we go. The comments that Karen just made and that Diane made led me to think about the role of religion in a caste system. And I apologize that I have not read the book, but for me, religion has always had a feel of a caste system. I grew up in a small town in Massachusetts where the irritation point was between religions, although it also masked those who'd been here and those who are new to the country. But in Massachusetts, because it was fairly near Cape Cod, we had many people of Portuguese descent and many first time it just arrived in the country, or first generation was what I was trying to say. And I went to school with many of those children, and I was very aware of their perception of me as someone that I wasn't supposed to play with them. I didn't feel it, but they did. And it went through the entire school time, but it began to emerge then as a Catholic Protestant thing. And in the town, by the time I got to high school, it was not only Portuguese, but a growing Irish community. And again, those two weren't supposed to mix. I tried out for the basketball team, not knowing that that was supposed to be for the Irish kids. And I got beaten up on the school bus going to the first game and told that I wasn't going to ever play on any team with them. And I never quite understood that whole thing, but I'm hearing the same kind of catch lines there that people use for religion, like don't swim in the pool. Well, don't join. You can't play this. You can't do that. And with Diane's grandparents coming to this country and being substratified by religion. If you're this religion, you're less than. There's this human drive to make somebody else less.
Yeah.
And I think it's throughout the world, but I think it's exaggerated in our culture because we have brought so many cultures here together and asked us all to blend. No excuse for it, no excuse whatsoever. But I do feel that religion is in that caste system.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Good point. Any other comments? Judy, I'm sorry, we have until what time?
We have, it normally is an hour, but you have, if you want to ask some more questions and people want to stay, that's absolutely fine. So we're not limited.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. I have a question. Is the concept of give the wall, this was, and she writes about this, lower caste stepping out of the way for upper caste.
Mhm.
Was that new to you?
It was for me, Adrienne. As I said, I didn't learn about this until I came back to the mainland. We moved to the mainland and I was in the 9th grade. I never knew anything about that.
Anyone else? Or how have you experienced this in your life? Expecting maybe someone, if you're passing someone who is not of the race that is supposed to be superior. This happened. I mean, I just always think about, I mean, and it's been what, 70 years now, and since I think it was the anniversary of Emmett Till.
Yeah.
But has that ever happened to anyone of you where, or are you familiar with this maybe not being able to walk on the same side of the road, or making someone, go ahead.
Pam Sloane, could you unmute, Pam? There you go.
I've never personally experienced it, and I was again shocked that it existed for so long. It was something I was aware of back in the 50s, let's say. The fact that it was still going on in the 60s and 70s, and probably even today in parts of our country, was the shocking part. I'd heard of it before, of course, but it was not something I ever personally experienced. So I don't know how to go beyond that. Yeah, I don't think people have walked away from me, and I don't usually walk away from other people unless I see a group that looks a little dangerous, like a bunch of kids who are drunk or something. I'll possibly walk away. But other than that, it's not a personal experience, except this, again, the surprise that she brought this out so brilliantly. And I do think the book is something that needs to be read by many, many people, and many young people.
Yes.
It's not, and I kept wondering about how we teach history these days, because I don't think we teach it the way it had been taught. And when I was taught, these were not the kinds of issues that came up. I don't think they were intentionally left out. I think it was because of where I grew up. I grew up in the Bronx, in a very isolated kind of neighborhood in a way. Everyone was either Italian or Irish. There were some Polish people, there was an occasional German family, but it was a pretty homogeneous looking kind of community. And so our experience was limited until later. And for myself, one of my first experiences in teaching, in fact, was in Project Head Start, the very first year of Head Start. And I was in the South Bronx with a group of children who would walk me to the subway station to make sure I was safe in their neighborhood getting back home. So I experienced being the only white person in a Black community. Very wonderful, interesting experience. I can still picture the children from that class, some of them whose names I can still remember. But yeah, so this idea of crossing the street, I was escorted in the street to protect me, to get me safely to a subway stop so I could get home to my home. So it was kind of a reverse of what we're talking about here.
Right.
So these are little 3- and 4-year-olds, right?
These were pre-kindergarten, and the purpose of the program, was to help bring them up so that when they were going into kindergarten, they would be on a better level had they not had this experience, than if they had not had that experience.
That's right.
And I think it's a program that continues. Those are the kinds of programs that have to exist everywhere and have to be elevating children from that stage, I think, from prenatal, in fact. I mean, we have a huge job ahead of us. We have made headway, but I really think the education piece is so critical, because people cannot change what they don't know. And our history is, I don't think children are taught American history. I mean, this book is a history book.
It's a history book.
To people, I've said, you're reading American history as if it's a novel.
That's right.
Page turner, and it's a great book. I recommended it to the library for Greenwich Reads as one of the books that we should be doing as a community. I think the current climate, especially with what's going on in Hartford right now, with recent legislation that is trying to be promoting a more, it's not public housing, but more
Affordable housing.
Affordable housing, thank you, has been met with a great deal of pushback. And it is racial issues are underlying it. There's no doubt about it.
Absolutely.
We can't get away from that. So, and that's a very hard thing to face in our community and in many like communities as well.
Yes.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Oh,
yes, Lee.
Lee. Could you unmute? There you go.
There I did, thank you. I'm sorry. This is an incident that happened to me just today. And when you talked about crossing the street, has anyone walked away from you? I had the opposite happen to me today. I was coming through Hevemeyer Park, which those of you who know, very narrow streets, and there's one particular street that has a very sharp curve, and people park on both sides of the street. And as I took a left turn and I was on MacArthur, I saw an elderly man walking toward the middle of the street, passing 3 parked cars. On the right, there was some kind of a service truck there, and clearly no room for a pedestrian and a car to stop. So I stopped well short of that, and I motioned to him to come along, and he stopped. And of course, he had a mask on, so I couldn't see well from that distance. And he hesitated, and then he stepped between 2 cars and he motioned to me, but he hadn't gone completely between. So I just stayed there and, did this because I didn't want to make him feel uncomfortable. And then he looked closely at me as he could, and he backed way back. And so I started to come along. And then as I got closer, I saw that he was Asian, and he actually withdrew.
Oh, wow.
Behind the car, and I almost stopped and cried. I didn't know what to think. And it's not someone I recognize. I live in a very mixed neighborhood and know a lot of the folks out walking and so forth. But I could only assume that because of my color and what's been happening in our country at this moment, that a gentleman, maybe my age or slightly older, was afraid to wait that I might, run him over. And that kind of brings this all into this focus, doesn't it? It's where we are. It's what we're living now.
Yeah.
In fact, our last question, I think, hits us right at the present moment. How has the pandemic shifted how you feel about the American caste system? What was unseen for you that is now seen? This last year, think about this last year.
Mamie had raised her hand. Mamie Lee,
Okay.
you had raised your hand. Did you want to say something? Was it in
Hi,
reference
can
to
you
what-
hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I've been waiting for the right opportunity. Our book group at the YWCA, the Diversity Book Group, read Caste. It was a difficult book to read. It was so difficult that we each took a third of the book, because other book groups did this where, some of us read 10 pages and then, the first 100 pages, not 10 pages. So, and then we discussed it, but it was such a heavy book that we decided we have to read a couple of novels after this, because it was just like so gut wrenching. We have read Isabel's first book.
Yes.
And we had discussion on this, but this was even more so. But and a lot of my friends are on this chat, but the anti-Asian, it's a very big issue. Right now I'm living in Hawaii. So Hawaii is very, very Asian. It's heavily dominated, where it's probably about 60% of the islands are Asian. And so we're not feeling the anti-Asian issues there. My daughter still lives in Greenwich. She is not feeling that. But my family that lives in New York, it's an issue. It's a very big issue. It's a very scary issue. My mom lives in Midtown Manhattan. I have a family that lives in Queens, and they go to Flushing. And I'm like, just hurry home. Just, they just like, they are so afraid. And they said, Mamie, thank goodness you're not here, because it is so scary here. And, I'm happy that my daughter is safe, but my whole family lives in the tri-state area, and it's difficult. One of our cousins, a 16-year-old, traveled on the subway, and somebody followed her down the subway, was yelling at her if she was Japanese or Chinese. She's 16 years old, just taking the train home from school. It's a scary place in there. And I was on a Zoom call with the Museum of Chinese Americas talking about the anti-Asian issues, and it's scary. It's scary. I mean, you know, fortunately or unfortunately, insular on an island here, but it's they were saying, well, should we be carrying pepper spray around with us? You know, so to Lee's, you know, people are scared, you know, and they shouldn't be scared in Greenwich, but you never know, you know. I mean, my Asian friends, you know, they have not told me that there has been any incidents in Greenwich, but you know, I don't know what's going on in Stamford. I don't know what's going on the rest of the Connecticut, but I know in New York, you know, I told my mom she can't, you know, just go to the grocery store and just run back home, you know. So, and my aunt that gets her hair done every week, I said, you know, she only has to walk a half a block to the bus. And I was like, okay, you know, just try to hurry up and get back to the main street so you won't be on a dark street by yourself, you know. But it's a scary situation right now, Asians. And it's happening all over the country.
Yes.
And Mamie, if I could just say, you know, when you said, well, you know, it's not happening in Greenwich. To me, if it happens anywhere, like well, anywhere in this country, it's wrong.
It's wrong, right?
And you know, it's equivalent to the fact that I have a son who lives in Nashville. I'm going to tell you, it concerns me. And you know, Nashville is a hot spot, you know, but it still makes me nervous when I know he wants to drive from Nashville to North Carolina or Nashville to Atlanta. I'm concerned. I'm concerned when my other son who lives here drives to Greenwich. That's the reality. And it's sad. And I think that, you know, having a book like this, if it helps to open up all of our eyes to know that this is real. This is not, we're not making this stuff up.
Happens every day.
Every day.
Every day. All over the country.
All over our country.
And in Greenwich.
And more conversations and more dialogue it's crucial. It has to be. Yes.
That's right.
It's crucial.
Lori Heiss would like to speak next.
Yes, Lori.
Could you unmute? There you
go.
Hi,
guys. Hi, Mamie. I'm part of Mamie's book group. And we did just read this last month, and that was quite an experience. I just wanted to weigh in on the pandemic. And I think one thing that I learned, which maybe I should already known, is that somehow it would disproportionately affect Black and Brown people. It never occurred to me that it would and why it would. And then suddenly the things that I learned, the demographics, the types of jobs, the places, the urban density, all these other socioeconomic factors came to light. And so that's been educational in a really interesting way. And just to step back to the Asian pandemic connection, this time last year, I was in a class in New York City, a lab class all day. And I sat next to a petite 5'2" girl from Wuhan, younger woman. And it was getting towards where we knew things were going to blow up and class was going to get stopped. And we were encouraging all the international students to wait it out so that we could go back to class together. And Jenny said to me, she goes, I can't, I have to go home. I'm like, Jenny, it's not good to go back to Wuhan, stay in New York, right? You know, stay in the country here, it'll be better. And she took her cell phone and she started to show me in Chinese, someone who had been hit, who was Asian. And I remember saying to her, this is about like, she left the country 3 days later. I remember saying, Jenny, this is not America. This is not this is not New York. We love Asians in New York. You know, this is not, that's one incident that you can't make your decision. And she said, and this is, this is a great note to sort of end on. She said, Lori, it's safer for me in Wuhan than it is in New York. and she was right, of course.
She was right.
But I didn't understand it then. So it's taken me, down with her. And we stay in touch. But I thought that we, especially in New York, couldn't be that way to Asians. It never crossed my mind that it would happen. And I mean, I knew what Trump was saying, okay, but it never occurred to me that people would then mistreat this little 5'2" Asian woman, but her parents in Wuhan were terrified for her life. Like, and repatriating in Wuhan then was a very difficult thing. It took a month to get back in, and it was hard, but anyway, and also I'm leading the book group a month from now. So
Good.
the overstory for the Perrot.
Yes, I before we lose anyone, I just wanted to throw in a reminder about Lori's discussion of the overstory, which will be Monday, April 26th. And you're all invited to attend. So we'll email all of you with the information. I think Nancy Lamazzo has her hand up. Let's see.
Yes, I wanted to give one pep talk. I don't know if I missed a few minutes at the beginning and someone said this, but anytime I recommend this book, Caste, because some people on this call haven't finished it or may not have read it yet, my pep talk to anyone is this is such a great book. It is so worth reading. And when you first start, you're like, oh my God, how am I going to get through this? I mean, it is rigorous to a point of really excruciating, right? And it's partially her academic way at the beginning. And I just want to encourage people, the person who said they split it in 3 might have a better sense of this, but I felt like the last third or half, towards the back, it's like a whole different book. And you will just fly through it and be like, oh, I feel like I can take a breath. And there's sort of a positive note to it. There's a bit of a feel good. I mean, I don't think she was being kind of Hollywood ending, but I just think she started with the macro and you've got to understand when someone from India says, oh my God, you guys have a caste system. Why don't you see it? We should realize that we've got a serious awakening ahead of us, right? And it's a lot to build and a lot to absorb, but it just happens that the way she built the book, that if you can hold on, it's worth it. And you get about 2/3 of the way through and you can sort of start breathing again. I mean, you're still processing, but you don't have to think, oh God, I've got another whole I've got another third of this book and I'm not going to do it. Like, just realize there's a different tone towards, and other people can correct me on that, but that was very much my feeling when I read it, that you get to sort of a different part of the book and it becomes more personal. I mean, it's just a different approach to it. But I also think that one of the things for me in this book is I've done a very small, I mean, it's like 5 to 10 people in my office. We're doing this sort of monthly book group and trying to do a lot of, racial awareness, what the hell, how much stuff we don't know. And every month we just go, oh my, and of course we're all white people. We're like, oh my God, we didn't know any of this. And we started with, mass incarceration, like talk about a heavy book.
Yeah.
And then we did a video the next month. Then we did a novel, because that mass incarceration book, again, has so much to say. And it's a slog because it is stats and to me, that's part of, in a way, for as hard as this book is to read, I think the thing that this book over like 15 other books I've read in the last year, one of the things that's unique to this book is I think she really does get to a point of focus to say, caste, what does this mean? Why is it different than being the Irish family before, and I have on my list, when the Irish became white. I haven't read that one yet, but I'm sure that has something to say in this too. But I always struggle with it, like, why does someone come here with nothing, not even language, and they jump over, and somehow you still see a huge, and obviously there's success stories, but there's this underclass, what is this? And honestly, I can't even identify one thing. There's so many things I didn't understand that I've learned about this year. And honestly, some of it really is the caste. It's this structural stuff. So I thought, oh, okay, banks don't lend to the neighborhood where they think it's not good value, and I know that like there's GI housing. I never knew GI housing was all white and there was no black version, and that there was no loan for the black guy who bought in his neighborhood because he couldn't buy in the new Levittown all white subdivision. Like all the pieces, like that's part of what Caste did for me, is it really started to link all of the pieces, and all of other things have done it too, but I think Caste definitely does that, is to understand how much structural stuff, you may think you know one thing, but it's not sinister until you realize how it connects to this and it connects to this, and how it really makes it so hard and impossible really for so many people. And you realize the exceptions are even more exceptional than you knew when you realize what that, what that is. So that's my pep talk for this book. Is so worth it. And I totally get that it's not easy. And I read nonfiction. I'm not a novel person. And I was still like, oh my God, I'm really, really hurting. This book is really, like, my brain is hurting. Literally, my heart's hurting and my brain is hurting.
Yeah.
And that's because it's worth it. So that's my pep talk.
Yeah.
Wow,
It's
Nancy.
really, it's a page turner. It
Yeah.
reads like a novel. And I know when Diane asked me to be a moderator here along with Adrienne, I went and bought the book. I borrowed it from the library first, and now I've got it. It's in my collection. And it read the same way the second time around. And I had even more aha moments the second time around. And I guarantee you, I'll read it a third time.
Yeah.
I will. Nancy, you're muted.
Yes, you need to.
Yeah, sorry, I said I couldn't unmute myself, but now it's letting me. The other thing I was going to say to that point, and this is why it's sort of shocking to me, I read Warmth of Other Suns, and it is literally in the one of the best books I've ever read category. Like, life-changing, way to put yourself in someone else's shoes, understand even, I mean, again, you know a little of this, but it takes, I forget if it's 5 stories, 3 stories. It's completely personal. Talk about a page turner. It was like, it's multiply bigger than Caste, and this breaks my heart. People read Caste, and I'm like, well, this one's twice as long. They're like, no way. I was like, it's so much more readable to me. Like, that to me was much bigger and equally impactful.
Absolutely.
But in a very deceptively almost narrative way. And this one is just different. It's tough. Like, I found this one, while it's narrative, to be a tougher read. So also, as an additional plug, Warmth of Other Suns, if you've not read it, you have to read it.
Yes,
I agree. It's really literally like almost life-changing. It's that powerful. That's my favorite.
Yes.
Thank you, Nancy. I think if we all took the initiative to be on the journey to learn and to really expose ourselves to such information, if we all did that, wow. So thank you. I'm personally thanking you for what you are doing to understand what has happened to the African Americans in our country, and you're continuing to learn so that you would be able to live life differently. And I just think it's so important for our circles of influence, for you all. I'm just saying this as a sister. When you do this kind of work, oh my God, what power we have to change. When you do the work like what you guys are doing, reading books like this and becoming educated and getting out there and making a difference to stop what has continued to tear people down. Do you know how much money it costs our country? Not just financial money, but like intellectual, the whole thing. So thank you for what you're doing. It's amazing. You had your hand raised?
Thank you.
Huh? Well, I guess, I don't know, Lynn, are we finished here?
I guess
Oh, you were just, you were raising your hand, or you're saying hi?
Has her hand raised? Does Pam Sloane have her hand raised?
Yes,
Okay.
Mamie does, and Karen Royce does.
Okay, shall we end up with those, I guess?
Okay.
Wow, we
Okay.
really, yeah, as Adrienne
Yes, I think
says,
so.
it's this conversation that is the healing thing, is that we read a book like this, we talk about it, and we start talking about these things to try and make it better. So thank you, Adrienne. Okay,
Yeah.
and who wants to say something?
Right, so it
Mamie,
was Karen Royce had raised her hand. Karen?
Mamie is unmuted first, and then Karen, and then Pam.
Okay, Mamie? Okay.
I just wanted to remember Nancy Brown, who was one of the most wonderful, wonderful women in the town of Greenwich and brought so much happiness to so many lives. And she just recently passed about a week ago. Adrienne, I don't know if you ever met Nancy,
I never
but
did.
she was the commissioner of community land grants for the town of Greenwich and started the Urban League. And she was just and I think a lot of people on this call probably knew her, but she just passed about a week ago. And she had done so much for the community and was such a wonderful inspiration to so many people within the whole Fairfield County.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you for bringing that to our attention and honoring her that way. Thank you.
Karen, you're next. Karen? Can you unmute?
I wanted to say that there was reference made to some of the legislation that's before the state on affordable housing, and I just want to say it's more complicated than it looks. Yes, it's been racialized and people are using it as an exclusion, to talk about it in an exclusionary way, but in my read, the desegregate Connecticut legislation is about density, much more so than about affordable housing. So I just want to say, when in a charged environment, it's hard sometimes to get to the facts that are involved. And I encourage people to really read the legislation and think about it. I totally agree that there are people who are using it as a way of excluding people on the basis of color, but it is more complicated than that. But I really wanted to say thank you. I think this has been a fabulous, fabulous discussion, and I really applaud Lynn and Adrienne for the work that they did to prepare for it and to guide us. And thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you.
Hey, Pam.
Hi. Am I unmuted? Yeah.
You
I
are.
can hear you.
I just wanted to say thank you as well, but I also wanted to circle back to the question you asked about how the pandemic has changed us. And I think in terms of race, it has certainly made me so much more aware of the number of people who have been dealing with every single aspect of this situation, quietly going to their jobs every day, whether the jobs are in hospitals. There are so many people at the hospital level who are people of color. And I think every person who has ever come to our door delivering anything this whole past year has been a person of color. I don't know how we would have survived without people who have taken on these jobs and have kept us all going. And that's a shout out of gratitude to everyone who has picked up and taken care of us in a way that we never would have thought about before. So gratitude to you all for what you're doing, and thank you for helping to educate me and others as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I send condolences too, because it is the people of color that is the largest amount that we've lost because of poor health conditions, living conditions, etc. So what have we lost? What, 500 million people? And a large amount of them are people of color.
Yeah.
So God bless.
Yeah.
That's true.
Allie, did you have your hand raised?
Oh, let me ask her to unmute. Can you unmute?
Yeah.
There we go. Hi.
Hi.
I first just want to say thank you so much. This has been such a powerful.
Allie.
Yeah.
Hi.
Oh, hi, Lynn. Such a powerful discussion. I did not read the book, so I was hesitant to participate. I just want to follow up with Karen's comments about affordable housing to say that the League of Women Voters is hosting a discussion with Desegregate Connecticut with Sarah Bronin and Margarita and Katie from Planning and Zoning here in Greenwich. And so if you are interested in learning more about that issue, that on the 31st of March at 1 o'clock, there's an opportunity to learn. Anyway, thank you. I'm just so inspired by all of you. And Nancy, I'm going to read the book.
Good.
Thank you.
It's well worth it.
Okay. so
Okay, are we good?
I think we're good. Thank you so
good.
much, Lynn and Adrienne, and all of you who joined us tonight. It was a wonderful discussion, and keep reading.
Yes,
Keep learning.
okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Good night.
Thank
Thank
you.
Good night.
Bye-bye.